Everyone, it's Ryan Lizzo with Tails News here with my weekly chat. This is my buddy Steve Schmidt doing this on Tuesday because of the Labor Day holiday. I've got the Trump Oval Office thing on in the background. We've been watching that, and maybe we'll chat about it if anything interesting crops up. Steve, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I saw that you are growing vegetables now.
I
You don't
am.
look you don't look like a vegetable growing person. I have to be honest. I've known you a long time. I've never known about the green thumb side of you.
Yeah.
Um, what's in the latest
Well,
bounty?
I spend a lot of time gardening. Most people don't know this about me.
No, they don't.
They don't know. But amongst I do a fair amount of birding, and I
I'm
like
so,
and I like gardening. So
a fair amount.
uh,
Are you a serious birder?
I would. There are
Because I'm going to
a
ask you questions.
serious.
If you're bullshitting, I'll get to the bottom of this.
I think a serious birder would look askance at my declaring that I'm a serious birder. But the older I get, the more I like looking at birds.
That's fair.
Right.
I think.
And
Yeah.
like, can I, and so no, so there are cherry tomatoes and beefsteak tomatoes, jalapenos, cucumbers, um, all sorts of good stuff.
I saw some of the pictures. People should check it out. We'll do a little chit chat here. If people are wondering why we're not being so serious, we're just going to let people come in. What'd you guys do what'd you get up to over Labor Day?
Um, well, I had a family wedding this weekend. Spent yesterday out on Lake Ontario. Took a boat over to a little town on the border called Niagara on the Lake.
Yeah.
Beautiful little town on the Niagara River. Came back across Lake Ontario. Saw a couple Blue Jays games in the last week. Blue Jays are still in first place, but it's
They
tightening
are.
up.
Okay. I haven't been following any
Um,
baseball, so
uh,
they're still.
and obviously trying to maintain some optimism about what's going on.
Is there? So tell me about that. What's making you optimistic? Because I certainly don't feel optimistic.
No, I said I'm trying to maintain some optimism. I it's I know how this will all end up, and our side will win. That being said, it's going to get a lot worse, I fear, and the primary impediment to making this stop is not MAGA, it's the Democratic leadership, primarily in the Senate. And
Yeah.
I'm discouraged by that. I get discouraged I found the whole Texas Democratic legislators to be very discouraging. The
Because you think they
celebration of
caved? Yeah.
victory after 12 days in Illinois. I just think it's so ludicrous. It depresses me.
What do you think they should have done in that situation that would have been more encouraging?
What was required was to stay in Illinois till December 8th. And
Yeah.
so, 12 days, I was thinking about my buddy Woody Harrelson. I mean, that's like not even a good fast for Woody, right? It's like a half fast. It's like a
For people
half-assed
who don't know,
fast, right?
I think there's probably
Like
people who don't know
12,
why he's your buddy.
it's
But
like 12,
so
it's like 12 days. I mean, it's like a half-assed hunger strike. I mean, 12 days up there. I mean, I think it's one of the crazier things, right? of this year, especially after everything in 2024, is that there's a crisis so great that you have to flee the state. You flee the state for 12 days, and when you come back, the result that you fled has been achieved, only now it's a great victory. I don't, and so the moment requires people to stop bullshitting each other and lying to each other about what's going on. I don't have a solution for how to fix that. I think that there's a lot of pathways to how to fight back against Donald Trump, but I don't know how you beat that. And that's really tragic to me.
I think to answer the same question, I think what's a little bit encouraging to me, and has been one of the bright spots this year, continues to be, and it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The courts stepping up and being the one forum where that is not tolerating the lawlessness of this administration. The court, Congress obviously is useless. The press is deeply, deeply problematic and compromised in a lot of ways. But the courts continue. There are judges in this country who continue to write, opinions for the history books. And two important ones since we last talked. One, the appeal of the tariffs decision was a huge defeat for Trump. These tariffs that everyone talks about as something that he's allowed to do have been declared illegal. And then, of course, this decision about the LA deployment, where federal judge in California said that Trump broke the law by deploying those 5,000 Marines and National Guard troops in LA in June. He said that they violated the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits the military to enforce domestic law. And all these cases are just lining up before the Supreme Court. And I guess we're going to learn before Election Day next year how far the Supreme Court is willing to allow Trump to be essentially lawless. And I think they've gone further than at least than I ever imagined. But I think that is going to be an issue that people will be voting on next November. Is if you want to check on Trump, it's not just Congress, but it's the courts. And I don't know, as a political strategist, if you think that was a message that resonates, but we see court after court saying enough, stop, and everyone sort of biting their fingernails about what the 6-3 majority will do with this stuff. Any thoughts on that, Steve?
Well, I think that the Supreme Court is a corrupt institution. And I ran the confirmation process for the Chief Justice and for Samuel Alito in the White House. But both men have utterly failed in the meeting of the obligations that they promised to meet when they were confirmed. John Roberts got 78 votes. Samuel Alito got 57. He was the more contentious of the two. But this court has made a mockery of the separation of powers, the idea that there is restraint in the powers of the presidency envisioned by the founders, and it's utterly corrupt. These decisions by the lower court judges establish something that's both necessary and deeply obvious, that Trump's actions are illegal. The use of the military is a violation of Posse Comitatus, and the Supreme Court declaring a Volkswagen is a kangaroo does not make it so. And so these actions by these lower courts have put a stamp for history on the illegality of this, right? And now we wait to see the corruption play out as the Supreme Court gets set to declare an apple and orange. And we've been there before as a country. The fundamental question that matters in 2026, and I think that we should talk about the fact that you have two leading Democratic governors, Pritzker and Newsom, are talking openly that, hey, I think the president of the United States may try to cancel the midterm elections. And they don't go any further than that. They just let it hang out there. But we ought to talk about what that means. Um,
Yeah.
and we should appreciate right now that what Trump is getting ready to do in Chicago is illegal.
And he's talking about it right now. I'm monitoring this.
It's
I don't
illegal,
have a yeah,
right?
yeah.
And in the end, the American people have to put a check on this. They have to say, we want this to stop. And Abraham Lincoln, said, with public opinion, anything is possible. Without it, nothing is possible. And so the American people are turning against this. And what we're seeing is two correlations, right? Trump is growing more unpopular by the day, right? But more powerful at some level by the hour, even though that power that's being accumulated is.
Steve, we lost your audio. At least I did. Steve,
Yeah. Is it
you're back.
back?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that, Trump is creating a scenario where his assertions of power are delinked from actual lawfulness, right? But he is unrestrained because of the theater. The media pretends he has these powers, and there's this acquiescence around them. And now we're going to see the military deployed into cities, and we're on the edge of disaster.
I think there's a lot there, Steve, and I want to pick up one thread, which is that federal judges, governors of major states are saying things out loud that we're in the realm of conspiracy theories. Not that long ago, and I don't think these are conspiracy theories. I'm saying this because responsible judges and elected officials are warning about Trump turning the military into his personal police force. And I want to read from the opinion where Judge Breyer in California says that, or as you point out, Governor Pritzker talking about the serious possibility of Trump doing something to mess with the midterm elections. And you and I and others have been talking about this for since day one. Trump has not been shy about this. It's shocking to me how little of this actually shows up when in the mainstream media, in the coverage. These threads are just lost in the daily to and fro of Trump insanity, and I think it's really important to keep our eyes on the ball, and that's why I was sort of blown away by this opinion out from this judge in California. And I just want to read a little bit of it, and I put it in the chat as well, and recommend that listeners check it out. Just a few paragraphs here, Steve, if you don't mind. Congress spoke clearly in 1878 when it passed the Posse Comitatus Act, prohibiting the use of the U.S. military to execute its domestic law. Nearly 140 years later, defendants, that's Trump and the Department of Defense. And remember, this is Newsom versus Trump, because this is a big victory for Newsom. Trump, Hegseth, Department of Defense deployed the National Guard and Marines to LA, ostensibly to quell a rebellion and ensure that federal immigration law was enforced. There were indeed protests in Los Angeles, and some individuals engaged in violence, yet there was no rebellion, nor was civilian law enforcement unable to respond to the protests and enforce the law. Nevertheless, at defendants' orders and contrary to Congress's explicit instruction, federal troops executed the laws. The evidence at trial established that defendants systematically used armed soldiers, whose identity was often obscured by protective armor, and military vehicles to set up protective perimeters and traffic blockades, engage in crowd control, and otherwise demonstrate a military presence in and around Los Angeles. In short, defendants violated the Posse Comitatus Act. Almost 3 months after defendants first deployed the National Guard to Los Angeles, 300 National Guard members remain stationed there. Moreover, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have stated their intention to call National Guard troops into federal service in other cities across the country, including Oakland and San Francisco, here in the Northern District of California, thus creating a national police force with the president as its chief. Because there is an ongoing risk that defendants will act unlawfully. It's talking about the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense. Ongoing risk that they will act unlawfully and thereby injure plaintiffs. Governor Newsom in the state of California, the court enjoins defendants from violating the Posse Comitatus Act as detailed below. So that's a federal judge saying that the president is creating a national police force with him as president, with him as its chief. Seems like a big fucking deal to me, Steve.
It's a very big deal.
And I see it on the top page of the New York Times, but honestly, I feel like the press has barely scratched the surface of what a sort of, 10 megaton bomb this is a federal court saying that the president's continuing to act unlawfully and creating a national police force.
Well, if not for the American political media, Donald Trump wouldn't be sitting in the White House. And that should never be lost in any conversation about this. The sheer awfulness of the coverage and the consistent awfulness of it. For example, he said during his remarks that he had cited the Space Force headquartered in Huntsville, Alabama, and did so at the expense of Colorado. And I actually think this is the appropriate decision. Huntsville, Alabama has always been the home of American rocketry since the end of World War II. It's where all the Germans that we took prisoner, like Werner von Braun, were sent for the Apollo program and so on and so forth. But Trump
Our
goes
Nazi
on.
Scientists.
Trump goes on and he says, well, they have mail-in balloting in Colorado, and that's corrupt, and I don't like it, and it's dishonest, and so I made this decision to punish Colorado and give it to Alabama, which is a confession, and I don't think he's smart enough to understand, right, about the nature of his retributional presidency. But besides that, the main point has no basis in fact. It's a Hitlerian type lie, right? Fantastical. Just like the claim of rebellion in Los Angeles. It's not real. There is no evidence that ties integrity, ballot integrity, in a negative way to mail-in ballots. It's a total, absolute delusion, fixation on the part of this strange-looking, sick, addled old man. It's not true.
Sorry for the background noise. I've got a puppy pushing things down. He said a couple of, the other thing he said, and he's still going, by the way. Seeing if there's anything I can pick up here.
these
We're talking
interactions.
about the tariffs now, but
Yeah.
I know you're right. They're not worth um, um, monitoring live. Um, yeah, so in other words, Trump made the right decision here, Alabama over Colorado, for the worst possible reasons, and admitted that it was completely political. At one moment he talked about how Alabama gave him, 40 something point victory, and joked, of course, that has nothing to do with why I'm doing this, um, admitting that it does. But then he went even further than that with this mail-in ballot stuff. What's the I admit that I haven't paid close attention to his latest round of obsession with mail-in ballots. He did this during his campaigns. In the last campaign, Republicans got him to shut up about it because Republicans in some state have historically had some of the best mail-in ballot programs in the country. In fact, I'll never forget being in Arizona in the run up to the election in 2020, and being at a Republican event with, I think, Laura Trump or someone like that, and the local congressman going on and on about how Trump is wrong to be opposed to mail-in ballots. Arizona has a great mail-in ballot program, and having to push back against that nonsense. But he's back on it. He's obsessed with it again. What's the worst case scenario with this obsession next year?
Well, let me just say that one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given in my life, right? It was about driving, and it came from my ninth grade history teacher, Mr. Sinkavage, right? And he said, "Drive in the middle because parked cars don't move." Right. And my father, right? My father expanded on the wisdom, and he said, driving, it's like physics, right? You got to appreciate that two objects can't simultaneously occupy the same space at the same time. Okay. But one of the experiences I've had in my life is I'm the guy who placed the phone call for John McCain to concede a presidential election to Barack Obama. And our whole civilization, the American civilization, the United States, all of it, every aspect of it is entirely dependent on the shared consensus that though I would like to be in charge, I accept in this land the sovereign is the people and they decide. And our society should have come to a type of complete stop. If it was a movie, what makes America glow, what makes it run, if it could be condensed to there was a reactor somewhere, and in that reactor was a power source, a jewel.
Yeah.
This idea is that jewel. The majesty in an instant upon the decision of a nation of 300 million people and more, that upon the commencement of a 35-word oath, power is transferred seamlessly and peacefully and reverently in an act of renewal that isn't just majestic, it's miraculous. And he took a sledgehammer to it. And he convinced with this Herculean lie this Hitlerian lie, the greatest lie in the history of the United States, that I won an election that was stolen from me. Not true.
No.
Absolute fantasy. And a generation of people, politicians, went along with it, and they have broken the country. And they have risked the collapse of the American Republic. The criminals,
Yes.
the mob, have been parties. And so the task of stopping this abomination from taking power by orders of magnitude was simpler and easier than removing it from power.
100%.
And the removing it from power requires an attenuation to reality and to what's happening. Clarity is an underappreciated virtue right now. Unfortunately, in too many places where there should be more clarity.
I think that's why these federal judicial opinions, to me, are a sort of river of sanity in the during the last few months, because of the clarity of these opinions and the way that these judges are clearly articulating what the truth of the matter is. For instance, this judge saying there was no rebellion. The president called up troops to quell a rebellion, but there was no rebellion. Something that, Trump's abilities to get his people to believe things that aren't true, or to create debates about things that are right before our eyes. And a lot of the fault of that goes to the press and the way
All
they
of the
cover
fault.
things.
All of the fault.
And that's why I think these federal opinions are just so important. I was actually thinking it would be a great service to sort of edit a book of some of the most important opinions, and there are enough of them just this year. I'd be interested if people in the chat think that would be a good idea. Would they buy something like that? Because there are too many of them, frankly, and they're sort of the most, to me, you don't find this in Congress. Unfortunately, you don't find it much in the press. But the place where I find sanity these days is in this writing by these judges. Frankly, even in a case where I had a view and it went the other way, if there's an intellectual honesty generally among federal judges that is very, very hard to find in public life these days. Now, of course, Trump is doing everything he can to destroy that. We have Emil Beauvais is one of the federal judges now. His personal lawyer and a deeply corrupted person whose tenure in the Trump administration he had his hands in all sorts of lawlessness.
Yeah. The
But anyway,
Democratic Party's position has to be, we're going to impeach him at our first opportunity. Give us 67 votes to get rid of him.
Yeah.
The Democrats are going to have to ask for votes for a mandate to clean this up and to use power. Before you can do that, you have to have a coherent plan, and there's not that. But assuming there will be that eventually, you're going to have to ask for a mandate, and the mandate is going to have to be to kick ass.
I agree, and it started with Newsom doing what he's doing with the maps, and just to talk about the politics between standing up to Trump and winning in federal court here, and we'll see where this goes on the on this issue of the troops in LA. Um, and if he secures a victory on these maps, and if the maps do indeed spell the difference in the midterms next year, I know that's a lot of ifs. Newsom is going to be a fearsome uh, primary candidate in 2028. Steve, yeah,
I
go ahead.
actually, I actually
You're a
think
Pritzker. You're. I know you're like you like Pritzker a lot right now.
I like, I like, I like, I like Newsom also, right? My point with Newsom is Gavin's on program now, right? He went he went wandering in the forest at the beginning of the Trump presidency, but as Gavin Newsom said, wake up if you don't see the danger. And what I was trying to say to Gavin Newsom in February was wake up if you don't if you don't see the danger. So, but I think that
No,
there's
he got it. He got
I
religion on this
I
stuff.
think
Found
here's
its
what
way
I
back, as Bridget Grady in the comments just said.
right now when I think about the Democratic debate stage, like is it forming in my head?
Multiple stages. They're not going to be able to fit all on one stage.
There, I think there's room for a dark horse younger candidate. Putting that aside, I really think right now it's a two-person race, right? It's
Pritzker.
Pritzker and Newsom, right? It's those are the only two people in the whole of the Democratic Party that have the gravity that's meeting the moment,
I agree. Or
right? That
and
have
frankly,
that just have heaviness,
or
right, for the
and a
moment.
position of power where
Yeah.
they can actually make a difference. They are locked in battles on a daily basis with this administration. They can take them to court. They can do what Newsom did in changing the maps. If you're Pete Buttigieg or even Kamala Harris, I don't think she'll run,
No,
but
not a credible candidate. Not
you just
not.
don't you don't have a position to do any of this from. So um,
Let me ask you this, right?
and then I want, and then Steve, I do want to talk. I'll throw out some things, some of the crazy shit that Trump has said in this press conference, just because why not? But go ahead.
I'm dreading this Kamala Harris book, right? Like the fucking plague, right?
why is
And
why is that?
I am the lack of judgment, right? Whether it's the husband who's staying at the capitulant law firm, we haven't heard anything of substance from her, and now it's a book about me, and the historic 107-day failed campaign after the Biden gaslighting that gave us the fascism. And there's a constituency of people in America. All right, some of them are on my platform, some of them are on yours. Right, that when you dare to say this, you're going to be shouted down
Yeah.
by a faction that says pointing that out is bad for democracy. And what I have to say to them is fuck you. And and when you look around the country and what's going on and moving through this, right? I'm begging people. We got 1,000 people on, right? You're gonna have dinner conversations. Um, I'm begging you, right? Wake up, right? And talk to the people you know, right? We're losing our country. It's time to stop pretending. It's time to stop pretending, right? With the cheerleading and the fanboying and the fangirling of these people who are failing in Texas, right? And pretending they won something, right? Failing in a presidential election, doing a book. Gretchen Whitmer hiding behind the folder. I want to be your leader. No, no, no. Stop.
All right. I'm gonna mount a minor defense of Harris on this issue. Well, one, I haven't read the book, and two, I'm going to hold off a little bit until I see what she says on this book tour, and whether she addresses the exact issues that you just, quite rightly, and criticisms that you just laid out. But I agree with you. What's being set up, it doesn't look like it's gonna address that or make either one of us happy. Um, and but you know what? Give her a shot, Steve. Maybe she'll say some things that will surprise you. But it does seem like she's not reading the room correctly. Um, and look, Biden's working on a book too, and that'll who knows when that'll be out. Maybe that's a longer term thing. But that's going to be, you know, we're going to have a similar conversation about that, and how he addresses this is, you know, interesting. I don't think Obama, his memoir was because it was split in two. I don't think he ever grappled with and dug very deep, or I haven't heard it about, his own role and what he could or couldn't have done differently in his last few years, or what responsibility he has. And I'm not saying he has any, but it's certainly like a question that any politician would ask
No, of
themselves
course.
for
Listen,
when someone came out, whoever comes after them, how much am I responsible? I think a lot of people would say he's not responsible for the racist backlash against his presidency, and he's not. But that's a question we're going to be asking for generations, right? Is what did Democrats do wrong in those 8 years that helped pave the way for Trump?
I I view fundamentally um, Donald Trump as a 21st century presidency that was a product of the failed 21st century presidencies that start with the guy I worked for, George W. Bush. And how we got here is deeply connected to that. The idea, though, that Barack Obama, right, doesn't bear any of the responsibility for how we ended up here by virtue of being president of the United States for 8 years just falls flat to me. Right. I remember that race in very particular detail in 2008. And I admire President Obama. But there were two disastrous presidencies, right? The idea that Democrats, like that they were programmed automatons out of Disney World who would be quoting the historic achievements of the Biden presidency to literally 7 weeks ago to you. Holy shit. Bill Clinton is not a 21st century president. He was a 20th century president. And we finished the 20th century in very, very strong shape. And one of the things, and these jobs are hard, right? But here's the failure of the Obama presidency. Here's
All right,
the
let's hear
big
it.
thing. The man was elected on a platform of hope. And while he was president, trust continued to evaporate in all of our institutions. And the reason it continued to evaporate more than any other is that he did not drop the hammer on the bankers who brought the country to its
Yeah.
knees through the Great Recession. And in the failure to do that, he codified something that's tragic and real: the breaking of the America's social compact, right? Really, which is that there are some rules for all of you and different rules for the people at the top. And the cynicism that that produced was ultimately exercised by the demagogue that the founders worried about. The fundamental issue the Democrats have to embrace is ethics reform, anti-corruption, campaign finance reform. The Democratic Party has to be the reform party. And the reform party in America has to be about stripping power away from the most powerful interests in the country, which are the tech oligarchs, the bankers, the president and the presidency, big ag, so on, so forth. And so progressivism should not be linked to speech codes as you must say these words and never these. It should be linked to the nature of the word progress. And progress right now is we have to pull the flag on that proverbial rope much more back onto our side of how we share power because it has been taken, it has been accumulated, and now it has to be taken back. And political power in America is taken, right? It's taken in elections, the
Yeah.
peaceful process with a fierce message. And now is such a time.
All right. So here's the I agree with you about the reform message and the anti big tech and billionaire class message. Um, and I think you will agree with me that Gavin Newsom, that Newsom and Pritzker are not perfect vessels for that message. Pritzker, of course, and you've talked about this before, Steve, about what he needs to do because of his own wealth and family name. And Newsom, because you don't hang around California politics as long as he has, get to where he is, without being a friend of the tech oligarchs in that state, Silicon Valley, the special interests, PG&E. He's not someone who has run his entire career in California against the establishment, right? I think it's safe to say that. So, as a political strategist, who's better positioned to be that candidate, or is it just impossible and they shouldn't try?
There's this speech that FDR gives in 1936, right before the election in Madison Square Garden, and in the speech he makes the point that never before in the history of the country have all of the country's most powerful interests aligned together against one guy, him, and he says, and I welcome their hatred.
Eat. Yeah. Yeah.
Whoever can do that most effectively is going to be the Democratic nominee. Who will be the champion for ordinary people who are yoked to 32% credit card interest rates, to the algorithm of credit scores, the total brokenness of higher education? I will say, as a parent who's writing a lot of tuition checks right in this moment right now with five
Yeah.
kids, right? It's like an undergraduate liberal arts
You got
degree is
me
a
beat there.
ludicrous
Yeah.
affair, right? It is
Yeah.
like the kids are having fun and it's a great rite of passage, right? But my senior daughter, right, has a class, right, called Trip to Belgium and France, right, for 3 credits and a liberal. I'm like, why am I paying this? I should be on Trip to Bora Bora, right? And so there's so many things, right? We have the crown jewel of the world's public health services is being decimated, destroyed. I mean, depending on what expert you talk to, Robert Kennedy. I, I had one of the nation's leading virologists on the other week. She said he's going to kill millions of people, right? Potentially. I can't comprehend it at some level, but what comes next, right, has to be built on an understanding it will stand on the ashes of what's gone.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing. These institutions have to be rebuilt. The officer corps of the U.S. military will have become corrupted under the Hegseth years. Right? The magnitude of the reforms ahead are profound, and the leadership required to get there is going to be immense. And the challenge to build a coalition, right, of Americans to stand against this and to stand for something is one of the most serious political challenges that any American politician has taken on and tried to do in about 160 years, with some obvious examples in there of other times where people had to measure up, like FDR. But there are not many, and the momentousness of what all of these people who are trying to do that, right? What they're trying to do, right? It's a big thing, and we'll see how they do it. We'll see how they do it. But it's not going to
There's
be a guy
yeah.
from DC.
No, I agree with you there. There are things that are there are things that aren't even broken yet that will be broken and need to be reformed and will be on that list. We haven't even, they haven't even broken everything that they're on track to break, which is kind of the scary thing about this. Steve, just quickly, let's go through some of the shit that happened in this press conference because I think there's a couple of important things. I'm gonna use the New York Times's coverage um, so one thing, this is just a typical Trump lie. He says there's now no crime in Washington. Wish that was the case. I live here in Washington. Obviously, there's still crime here, and I do wonder if he gives up on the National Guard in D.C. and just sort of like declares a victory. I don't know what he's telegraphing with that. He says it's now a safe zone. Um, but something a lot more frightening, two things in talking about crime. He's just been the subject of a federal judge in California who said he broke the law with his military deployments and he needs to stop. Then, of course, he's asked if he's going to send the National Guard into Chicago. What does Trump say? We're going in. Okay. So he just declared that when he was asked whether there was a decision to deploy, he didn't say when, but he's already sort of thumbing his nose at this decision, showing no, respect for it whatsoever. Not shocking. Um, that's the first thing, and then well, let's start with that. Where do you think where do you think this issue is going?
Well, I mean, first off, this issue takes place in the context of our idiotized society, right? In that you watch these clips on Fox, right? Well, crime is down. Okay. Because you deployed the National Guard and you can maintain that for how long? Right? So putting a bandage around a cut does not make the cut go away. It just stops the bleeding and it just covers up the wound. And so it's illegal. The judge stayed the decision till September 12th for the appeals court to rule. But this is an age-old question. We can reduce crime to zero in America, right? We can have
Absolutely.
an armed militia on every street,
Yeah.
right? We can
Yeah.
have
We can have
posses
the
of
equivalent.
vigilantes. We can
Yeah. We
have
can have the
we can
equivalent
have
of
a
red light
court,
cameras in our homes.
right? We can have cameras everywhere, right? But all
Yeah.
you have to do is give up all your freedom and liberty, and you can have
Exactly.
total safety. No, thank you,
Yeah.
right? So this is an existential question, right? In the United States, we do not deploy the armed forces to police the citizenry. We have policemen and policewomen. And one of the things that I've talked about for years, and I should have talked about more loudly, is the obscenity of policemen and women dressed up like Navy SEALs. And these militarized law enforcement forces have led us to this place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so this is yet another thing that has to be fixed, that has to be addressed, right? Big recruiting uh exposition underway in Salt Lake City. Right? Imagine the losers, right, who would have been completely underqualified, unqualified for service as a federal agent that this is going to attract. Right? We
Yeah.
got mall cops and likely January 6th pardoned criminals that are going to be made federal agents and turned loose in the country, and it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. Imagine in the current climate, watching what's going on, and your big life decision is, I want to be an ICE agent
Um,
working essentially directly for Kristi Noem and Donald Trump. Um, that pool of candidates is going to be very special. And, I'd like to think that there are people out there who are thinking, good people who are thinking, well, uh, maybe I should become an ICE agent because, I don't want the worst of the worst doing
there
it.
are no good
But
people. There are
but
no
that's
good
not
people.
happening.
There are no good people. More importantly, there are no patriotic people. Not a fucking one that wants to put their mask on and go catch brown skinned people. Um, Whatever it is they wish to call themselves, patriotic American isn't one of them. They don't get to do that.
Trump also said, and this will be interesting, that they're going to ask the Supreme Court as soon as Wednesday to overturn the tariff ruling, and they're going to seek expedited treatment for that. So
Now,
we're going to have a big, big test in that case.
that to me is there's nothing that is more clear cut than that. This is
The tariff decision.
on the tariffs. This is a congressional power, right? The tariffs are illegal. If this corrupt Supreme Court comes back, right, it
Yeah.
says, right, the tariffs are now a core presidential power. What that means is that they will obliterate the 22nd Amendment regarding a third presidential term. Right. That means that you have a Supreme Court of corrupt justices who will manipulate the laws, judicial engineers to turn red into blue and up into down and left into right, is what that means.
Wait, what do you mean they will obliterate the prohibition against
What
a
I'm what
third
I'm
term?
what I'm what I'm saying
In
is
other words, they would do that as well.
there's no question here about the unconstitutionality of Donald Trump's
Yeah.
tariffs.
Yeah.
In the United States Constitution, the tariff authority is vested with the Congress, not the president. So Donald Trump has not had, does not have, never will have this authority unless it is bestowed on him by this corrupt court. And if they do, right, a magical judicial engineering feat, which is what this will, what it harkens is the obliteration of the 22nd Amendment, because that is as clear as this, and there should be no question about any of this. This is basic civics. This is an Article 1 power, and case closed.
I I bet they back him on this. I bet the Supreme Court says he can do this.
Then
The
then you're
the
then
law?
you're really decision. That's a big decision,
Yeah.
right? That's a fall of
Yeah.
the republic type decision, because
That's that's where we
right,
take this court.
what the Supreme Court is saying is you're the dictator. You decide, not
If
the
they're a
Congress, not
if
what
they're
not what the Constitution says. And once you establish the precedent of, well, we'll rule in favor of anything you want to do, which will be essentially the jurisprudence of the decision, right? You have a
Yeah.
Republican name only.
if this court thinks they can find something in a law and in this emergency powers law that Trump is using, and if they think they can, uh, they're all Ivy League educated lawyers who are trained
I don't
to
I
make a
don't doubt
case for anything they want. And if they can find a way to say, yeah, he can say this is an economic emergency, and yeah, there's a line there in the law
I
that says he can do this. He has that power.
I don't have a doubt in my
They'll
mind.
they'll they'll do it. I'm
I don't have a doubt in my mind that there is constant, continuous contact between the conservative Supreme Court justices and the political operation of this White House every day, right?
Yeah.
Coming forward this, right? I have no doubt about the collusion, about the corruption. Here's the deal. You will know, you will know, right? If there's any pretense, right, in this court about following the Constitution on this ruling. The president simply does not have the authority. It's made up power. It is a feat of judicial engineering, right, by the Supreme Court, unprecedented in the modern era. And right,
100%.
and the Roberts court, right? It's like John Roberts is a villainous figure in the history of this country. He's up there with the Chief Justice Taney. He is a person. Half of all Americans who have ever lived are alive right now, right? There's only ever been 700 million of us.
Yeah.
And you look at the people, right, who have done terrible things. Right? Robert Lee raised his sword against the nation, right? And he led an army that killed 800,000 people. Right? You look at the worst of the worst of the worst of us, right? And what they've achieved in history. That's what we're talking about here.
Well, I think we're
And
gonna.
John
Yeah.
Roberts is on this list. He has permitted this. He more than any other person, he set the conditions for this country to have a demagogue who declared himself a king. He did that. And the high court of history is going to hang him fucking high.
Well, I don't think these guys are even close to finish
No.
in terms of giving Trump what he wants in terms of presidential powers. I think they've are reserving any any standing up to him for the most controversial, most over the line um, case, and these other ones that can be described in technical terms that people won't understand. They'll just give him everything he wants. That's my own cynical view of that. Um,
Again, Lincoln had many things right, and he certainly had this. In America, with public sentiment, you can do anything. Without it, you can do nothing.
I think it's
And so
yeah.
every institution, right, in the country that I can think of has fallen short. That being said, those institutions are fundamentally made up of people, and people can fall short or they can measure up. And I don't think we're past the chapters of measuring up yet. When people talk about we won't have elections, we should talk about this next time, about the implications of that, because they're very
Yeah,
dark
isn't there?
and very
They're
violent.
extremely dark. I would say, just as we wrap up here, three things to keep an eye on that have happened in the last few days. One is, as you pointed out, Pritzker, responsible officials warning the public that Trump is trying to fuck with the midterm elections, that he is laying a case, laying the predicate to do things that will mess with that election. Two, this federal court in California told him he's breaking the law, comes out in his first press conference, ignores it, and says he's sending troops to Chicago. Another court says he's breaking the law when it comes to tariffs. In this press conference, he talks about a 50% tariff on India that's not going anywhere. Not even no president in history would thumb their nose at a federal court the way he has, with absolute confidence that these things will end up at the Supreme Court where he thinks he'll be
Yeah.
victorious. So
Yeah.
things are bad, Steve. Things are bad.
Yeah, they are. No, there's no question about it. Things are bad. The economy's getting worse, and a lot of people are going to suffer.
But
Um,
he's unpopular, and the more that the Congress and the Supreme Court don't put a check on him, I do genuinely believe the system will rebalance, the public will get wise, and there'll be a correction, which of course is why anything that messes with the elections in any way is,
yeah.
republic destroying level of event.
Let
But
me
he's going
make
to do it. He's going to do it. He's going to do things that will mess with those elections. He has never been in an election that he didn't in some way corrupt. People sometimes forget this. It started with the Iowa caucuses. He accused everyone of fraud. He tried to overturn the election in 2020. He set the stage for doing something similar in 2024. He's never ever respected an election. He's always set up an election that he goes into with the possibility that he can claim fraud, corruption, or in this case, I think much worse.
let me let me let me just I guess last thing I'd say today is that you see these reports of these town hall meetings out across the country with the members of Congress, and you watch these debacles play out in the Oval Office or wherever he is with all of his stooges lined up. And I guess the question I would pose is, which one is more real? Which one is more real in terms of what's happening in the country? And what I would say is what's more real is the rage at those town halls than the Potemkin theater we're seeing in the Oval Office with the corrupt and capitulant political media in the country. And so I think the anger is very real. I think the lawlessness is very real. I think the corruption is very real. And it's all boiling together in the pot. And we'll see how it spills out over the edge and who gets burned and who gets scalded the most.
Man, this was a depressing conversation, my friend. It's good to be back with you. We'll be back at the regular time, Monday at
Yep.
noon next week. Thanks to everyone for
Good to
joining.
see you.
If you're not a paid subscriber to see Steve's Substack or mine, please check us out and consider doing that. I'll see you soon, man. Take care.
Good to see you, Ron.